Hey guys, tonight we begin with Victorian asylums, where being a woman with opinions could get you locked away for life. Because let me tell you, thousands of sane women were imprisoned in madhouses, not because they were insane, but because they were inconvenient. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from and what time it is for you. It is always fascinating to see who is joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Think about your worst nightmare of powerlessness. You are dragged from your home by strangers, locked in a room with barred windows, stripped of your clothes and identity, and told you are insane. Your protests, according to your captors, are proof of your madness. Your pleas to go home, according to the doctors, are symptoms of your delusions. Every word you speak, according to the system, confirms your insanity. You are trapped in a place where sanity looks like madness and resistance proves guilt. That nightmare, according to historical records, was reality for tens of thousands of women in Victorian England and America. According to psychiatric historian Andrew Scull from Princeton University, Victorian asylums became dumping grounds for inconvenient women. The women, according to admission records analysed by historians, weren't necessarily mentally ill by any medical standard. They were rebellious wives, women who wanted divorces, daughters who refused arranged marriages, widows whose relatives wanted their inheritance, wives whose husbands wanted new partners, women who challenged male authority, women who were too independent, too outspoken, too sexual, or not sexual enough. The diagnosis, according to its actual function, was a tool of social control disguised as medical treatment. Tonight, according to what I am going to show you, we'll journey into the locked wards of Victorian asylums and meet the women who were imprisoned there. You'll discover exactly what happened inside these institutions, the treatments that were actually torture, the doctors who had absolute power over women's bodies, the families who used medical diagnoses to silence difficult women, and the rare women who escaped to tell their stories. We'll explore the specific reasons women were committed, the conditions they endured, the cures that damaged or killed them, and the legal system that made it nearly impossible to prove you were sane once labelled insane. This isn't just about Victorian cruelty. According to modern psychiatric historians, it is about understanding how medicine, law, gender, and power intersected to create a system where women could be disappeared into institutions with almost no legal recourse. According to what we'll see, the echoes of these practices persist in modern psychiatric care, involuntary commitment laws, and ongoing debates about who gets to define mental illness. Let's start with how easy it was to commit a woman to an asylum. According to legal historians studying Victorian commitment laws, the process was shockingly simple and required minimal evidence of actual mental illness. In many jurisdictions, according to the legal requirements, 2 doctors' signatures and a male relative's request were sufficient to lock a woman away for life. The doctors, according to common practice, didn't need to conduct thorough examinations. A brief interview, according to standard procedure, was often enough, and the doctors, according to financial incentives, were frequently paid by the person seeking commitment. Meet Sarah, a 32-year-old married woman in London, 1858. According to your situation, you've been married for 8 years to a man who controls every aspect of your life. You've recently, according to your growing courage, begun to challenge his authority. You questioned his decision to spend your inheritance without consulting you. You objected, according to your reasonable concern, when he wanted to send your children away to boarding school. You refused, according to your bodily autonomy, his sexual demands after he came home drunk. Your husband, according to his response, consulted with a doctor who was his friend. The doctor, according to the brief examination, visited your home one afternoon. He asked you, according to his interview, a few questions about your mood and your relationship with your husband. You answered honestly. according to your trust in medical authority. You said you felt unhappy in your marriage. You said you sometimes wished you could leave. You said you felt your husband didn't respect you. That honesty, according to the doctor's diagnosis, was proof of mental illness. Your unhappiness, according to medical theory of the era, indicated hysteria. Your desire for autonomy, according to psychiatric understanding, suggested moral insanity. Your refusal of wifely duties, according to the judgment, demonstrated mania. The doctor, according to his recommendation, suggested you needed asylum treatment for your own protection. 3 days later, according to what happens next, 2 men arrive at your house with legal papers. Your husband, according to his signature on the commitment order, has had you declared insane. You have no warning, according to the legal process, and no opportunity to defend yourself. You protest, according to your desperate resistance, that you are perfectly sane. Your protests, according to the interpretation, are seen as agitation proving your diagnosis. You are physically carried, according to the procedure, to a waiting carriage. Your children, according to your last glimpse of them, watch from the window as you are taken away. You never see them again. According to Victorian commitment laws analysed by legal historian Akihito Suzuki, women had almost no legal rights in the commitment process. You couldn't, according to the law, refuse examination by doctors. You couldn't, according to legal restrictions, challenge your husband's decision to commit you. You couldn't, according to the procedures, demand evidence of your alleged insanity. Once the papers were signed, according to legal reality, you were declared legally incompetent. Your testimony, according to the court's view, was worthless because insane people cannot be trusted to accurately assess their own mental state. The criteria for female insanity, according to medical texts from the Victorian era, were stunningly broad. According to analysis by historian Elaine Showalter in her groundbreaking work, The Female Malady, the following behaviours could get you committed: disagreeing with your husband, wanting a divorce, being too interested in sex, being not interested enough in sex, reading too many novels, having political opinions, refusing to do housework, being too religious, not being religious enough, menstruating irregularly, experiencing menopause, having postpartum depression, being too emotional, being too unemotional, being too talkative, being too quiet, being too independent, or being too dependent. Think about that list. According to its comprehensiveness, almost any woman could be diagnosed as insane if someone wanted her locked away. The definitions, according to their vagueness, gave doctors enormous discretion, and the doctors, according to their social position, were almost always men who shared the gender assumptions of their era. A woman challenging male authority, according to medical understanding, was by definition showing signs of mental disturbance, because proper femininity meant submission. Now, let's meet Elizabeth Packard, one of the few women who escaped an asylum and wrote about her experience. According to her published account, Modern Persecution or Insane Asylums Unveiled, 1873, Elizabeth was committed by her husband in 1860 after she disagreed with his religious views. She was, according to her background, intelligent, educated, and outspoken. She questioned, according to her theological interests, some of her husband's Calvinist interpretations. She attended, according to her independence, a different church than he preferred. Her husband Theophilus, according to his response, had her declared insane and committed to Jacksonville Insane Asylum in Illinois. Elizabeth, according to her actual mental state, was completely sane. The asylum doctors, according to their examinations, found no evidence of insanity, but according to Illinois law at the time, a married man could commit his wife without any requirement to prove she was actually insane. The husband's word, according to legal standing, was sufficient. Elizabeth spent 3 years in the asylum. According to her detailed accounts, she was locked in wards with genuinely mentally ill patients, denied proper clothing, subjected to restraints when she protested, and given no opportunity to prove her sanity. The staff, according to her observations, included both genuinely caring attendants and brutal guards who beat patients. The conditions, according to her descriptions, were overcrowded, unsanitary, and dehumanizing. Women, according to what she witnessed, were treated as objects to be managed, not patients to be healed. When Elizabeth was finally released, according to her account, it was only because the asylum trustees realized keeping an obviously sane woman was creating legal liability. She returned home, according to the law, to find her husband had taken control of all her property, custody of their children, and her legal rights. She spent the rest of her life, according to her activism, campaigning for commitment law reform. Her efforts, according to legislative history, helped pass laws in many states requiring jury trials before commitment. But according to the tragedy, Elizabeth Packard's case was exceptional because she got out and could tell her story. Most women, according to statistical reality, never left. They died in asylums, according to death records after decades of confinement. Their stories, according to historical silence, died with them. Let's examine the conditions inside Victorian asylums to understand what women endured. According to investigative reports from the era, conditions varied from grim to horrific. The best asylums, according to contemporary accounts, were overcrowded institutions where women received minimal care. The worst, according to expertise by journalists and reformers, were hellholes where women were tortured under the guise of treatment. Meet Margaret, a patient at a London asylum in 1870. According to your daily reality, you wake at 5 a.m. when attendants bang on the door of the ward. You sleep, according to the facilities, in a long room lined with narrow iron beds. There are 40 women in this ward, according to the crowding, sharing a space designed for 20. The woman in the bed next to you, according to her condition, has been screaming all night. No one, according to the staff's response, has come to help her. You rise according to the required routine and join the line for the washroom. There are 3 sinks, according to the inadequate facilities for 40 women. The water, according to its temperature, is ice cold. There is 1 small piece of rough soap, according to the supplies, for everyone to share. You wash your face and hands, according to what is possible in the time allowed. In the 2 minutes before attendants push you toward the dining hall. Breakfast, according to its quality, is thin porridge and a slice of hard bread. The porridge, according to its consistency, is mostly water with a few oats floating in it. You are hungry, according to your constant state, because this will be your only substantial meal until the evening. The meals, according to asylum budgets, are kept cheap. Patients, according to administrative thinking, don't need much food because they don't do hard labor. That you are starving, according to your complaints, is ignored. After breakfast, according to the schedule, you are locked in a day room with the other women. The room, according to its furnishings, contains rough wooden benches and nothing else. No books, according to the deprivation, because reading might excite your mind. No handwork, according to the restrictions, because needles could be weapons. No writing materials, according to the rules, because you might write complaints. You sit, according to your options, and do nothing for 8 hours until the evening meal. The boredom, according to modern psychiatric understanding, is itself a form of torture. Humans, according to psychological research, need mental stimulation. Extended sensory deprivation, according to its effects, actually causes mental deterioration. The asylum, according to this cruel irony, creates mental illness in previously healthy people and worsens conditions in those who were genuinely ill. The treatment, according to its outcome, causes the very symptoms it claims to cure. Some women, according to their desperate attempts at occupation, pace the room constantly. Others, according to their withdrawal, sit motionless staring at walls. Some, according to their need for human contact, talk obsessively to anyone who will listen. Others, according to their trauma response, become mute. The staff, according to their interpretation, sees all these behaviors as symptoms of insanity. rather than normal responses to an abnormal situation. According to psychiatric historian Roy Porter's analysis, Victorian asylums operated on a fundamental paradox. They claimed to treat mental illness through moral treatment, order, routine, and calm. But the reality, according to actual conditions, involved chaos, violence, and terror. The institutions, according to their actual function, were warehouses for unwanted people, not hospitals for healing. Now let's explore the treatments Victorian asylums inflicted on women. According to medical records and patient accounts, these treatments were based on theories that ranged from questionable to completely false. The treatments, according to modern medical analysis, were at best useless and at worst horrifically damaging. The most common treatment, according to medical theory of the era, was the rest cure developed by Dr. Silas Weir Mitchell. The cure, according to its protocol, required complete bed rest, isolation, and forced feeding. Women, according to the treatment, were forbidden to read, write, talk, or do any intellectual activity. They lay in bed, according to the regimen, for weeks or months, doing absolutely nothing. The theory, according to Mitchell's reasoning, was that mental illness in women was caused by overexcitement of the nervous system, and total rest would allow recovery. Meet Charlotte Perkins Gilman, a writer who underwent the rest cure in 1887. According to her published account in the Yellow Wallpaper, she was prescribed the rest cure for postpartum depression after the birth of her daughter. The doctor, according to his instructions, told her to live as domestic a life as possible and never to touch pen, brush, or pencil again. She was, according to the restrictions, forbidden to write, forbidden to see friends, forbidden to engage in intellectual work. The cure, according to its actual effects, nearly drove her insane. The enforced idleness, according to her experience, made her depression catastrophically worse. Her famous story, The Yellow Wallpaper, according to literary analysis, depicts a woman's descent into actual madness caused by the rest cure. The wallpaper, according to the story's symbolism, represents the narrator's mind breaking under the torture of enforced passivity. Charlotte, according to her eventual recovery, only got better after she abandoned the rest cure, left her husband, and returned to her writing career. But according to tragic reality, Charlotte Perkins Gilman was unusual in being able to choose to stop the treatment. Women in asylums, according to their lack of power, couldn't refuse. They underwent, according to asylum records, months or even years of enforced bed rest. The treatment, according to modern medical understanding, caused muscle atrophy, bed sores, social isolation, and genuine psychological deterioration. The cure, according to its effects, created the madness it claimed to treat. Another common treatment, according to asylum practices, was hydrotherapy, using water in various ways supposedly therapeutic. According to medical theory, cold water could shock patients out of mental illness. According to the brutal reality, hydrotherapy meant ice baths, high-pressure water hoses, and forced immersion in freezing water for extended periods. Meet Agnes, a patient subjected to hydrotherapy at a Massachusetts asylum in 1880. According to the treatment protocol, you are taken to a special room containing a large tub. The attendants, according to their instructions, strip off your clothing. You are lowered, according to the procedure, into a tub filled with ice water. The cold, according to your body's reaction, is so intense you can't breathe. You gasp and scream, according to your involuntary response. The attendants, according to their orders, hold you in the ice bath for 15 minutes. Your body, according to its physical response, goes into shock. You shake uncontrollably, according to the extreme cold. Your skin turns blue, according to the temperature. You beg them, according to your desperation, to take you out. They ignore you, according to the treatment protocol. This is therapy, according to medical belief, not punishment. The shock, according to the theory, will reset your nervous system. When they finally pull you out, according to the next phase, you can barely move your muscles. according to the cold's effects, don't respond properly. They wrap you, according to the procedure, in cold, wet sheets and leave you lying on a table for another hour. Then, according to the final phase, they put you back in ice water for another 15 minutes. This treatment, according to the prescribed regimen, happens 3 times a week. The hydrotherapy, according to modern medical analysis, was dangerous and traumatic. Hypothermia, according to medical understanding, stresses every system in the body. Repeated exposure, according to physiological effects, causes lasting damage to circulation, immune function, and nervous system. The psychological trauma, according to modern psychiatric understanding, compounds existing mental health problems. The treatment, according to its reality, was torture disguised as medicine. Some asylums, according to their equipment, had elaborate hydrotherapy apparatus. The douche bath, according to its design, strapped women onto boards and directed high-pressure jets of cold water at them. The pressure, according to patient accounts, was strong enough to bruise skin and knock breath from lungs. Women were subjected, according to treatment records, to hours under the high-pressure spray. The continuous bath, according to another method, involved placing women in lukewarm water for days at a time. They lay, according to the procedure, in canvas hammocks suspended in tubs, with only their heads above water. They ate, according to the conditions, while in the bath. They urinated and defecated, according to bodily functions, into the bath water. They couldn't leave, according to the restraints, even to sleep. The treatment, according to its justification, was supposed to be calming. According to reality, it was profoundly dehumanizing and physically damaging. Now let's discuss the most horrific treatment, gynecological surgery as a cure for insanity. According to medical theory in the late Victorian era, many female mental problems were believed to originate in the reproductive organs. The uterus, according to medical texts, could cause hysteria. The ovaries, according to surgical theory, could cause mania. The treatment, according to this pseudoscience, was surgical removal. Dr. Robert Batty, according to medical history, pioneered normal ovariotomy, surgical removal of healthy ovaries to treat insanity and other female complaints. Starting in 1872, according to surgical records, he and other doctors performed thousands of these operations. The surgery, according to its invasiveness, involved opening the abdomen, locating the ovaries, and cutting them out. This was, according to the surgical risks, before the development of antibiotics and modern anesthesia. Meet Julia, subjected to a variotomy at an asylum in Georgia in 1885. According to your medical history, you were committed for erotomania, supposedly excessive sexual desire. The diagnosis, according to actual circumstances, came from your husband, who was angry that you refused his sexual advances. You didn't, according to reality, have excessive desire. You simply, according to your reasonable preference, didn't want to have sex with a man who beat you. The asylum doctor, according to his diagnosis, agreed you suffered from erotomania. The cure, according to his recommendation, was removal of your ovaries. You, according to your lack of legal rights, cannot refuse. You are not asked, according to asylum protocols, for consent. You are not even told, according to the information withheld, what is going to happen until the day of surgery. The operation, according to its procedure, is performed without sufficient anesthesia. You feel, according to the inadequate pain control, much of the cutting. You scream, according to your agony, throughout the procedure. The surgeon, according to his interpretation, sees your screaming as more evidence of your mania. When it is over, according to the outcome, you've been surgically castrated. You are 28 years old, according to your age, and you'll never be able to have children. The surgery, according to its immediate effects, nearly kills you. You develop, according to surgical complications, a severe infection. For weeks, according to your condition, You hover near death with high fever and abdominal pain. You survive according to luck rather than medical care, but your health is permanently damaged. The surgical wound, according to poor healing, leaves you with chronic pain. The removal of your ovaries, according to hormonal effects, causes premature menopause. You experience, according to the hormonal changes, hot flashes, depression, bone loss, and heart problems. The surgery, according to its claim, was supposed to cure your mental illness. According to reality, you were never mentally ill. The operation, according to its actual effect, is mutilation that destroyed your health and fertility to punish you for not being a submissive wife. And you, according to the tragic outcome, are one of thousands of women subjected to this barbaric treatment. According to medical historian Lawrence D. Longo's research, thousands of women underwent ovariotomy for psychiatric reasons between 1870 and 1900. The mortality rate, according to surgical records, was as high as 33%. 1 in 3 women, according to the statistics, died from the operations. Those who survived according to the outcomes frequently experienced chronic health problems from the surgery and the sudden loss of hormones. The treatment, according to modern medical consensus, had no legitimate basis. It was pseudo-scientific mutilation masquerading as medicine. Other gynecological treatments, according to asylum practices, included clitoridectomy, surgical removal of the clitoris, supposedly to treat hysteria and masturbation. Cauterization of the cervix, according to medical records, was performed to treat various vaguely defined female complaints. These surgeries, according to their justification, were based on the belief that women's mental and physical health was controlled by their reproductive organs. The surgeries, according to their reality, were violent expressions of medical misogyny. Let's examine the role of male doctors' control over women's bodies in asylum medicine. According to historian Carol Smith Rosenberg's analysis, Victorian medical theory viewed women as fundamentally controlled by their reproductive systems. The uterus, according to medical texts, wandered through the body, causing various ailments. Menstruation, according to medical belief, made women temporarily insane. Pregnancy, according to medical theory, fundamentally altered women's mental state. Menopause, according to doctors, caused madness. This medical framework, according to its function, meant that being female was itself a kind of illness. Normal female biological processes, according to medicalization, were reframed as symptoms, and male doctors, according to their professional authority, claimed expertise over female bodies and minds that women themselves supposedly lacked. The medical profession, according to its gender composition, was almost entirely male in the Victorian era. Female doctors existed, according to small numbers, but faced enormous barriers. Male doctors, according to their professional organizations, actively worked to exclude women from medical training and practice. The result, according to the power dynamic, was that male doctors had near absolute authority to define what constituted a healthy or sick woman. Meet Dr. Henry Maudsley, one of Victorian England's most prominent psychiatrists. According to his published writings, he believed that education and intellectual work damaged women's reproductive systems and caused insanity. Women, according to his medical opinion, had limited mental energy that needed to be preserved for reproduction. Using that energy for studying, according to his theory, diverted it from the uterus to the brain, causing both infertility and madness. His theories, according to their influence, shaped asylum treatment of women. Intellectual women, according to this medical framework, were by definition mentally ill. The cure, according to the prescribed treatment, was enforced idleness and focus on domestic tasks. Women who wanted education, careers, or independence, according to the diagnosis, needed asylum treatment to restore them to proper femininity. Think about the power dynamic this created. You, according to your position as a Victorian woman, have no medical authority over your own body. A male doctor, according to his professional expertise, can examine you intimately without your consent. He can declare you insane according to his judgment, based on criteria that are fundamentally about gender conformity, rather than actual mental illness. He can prescribe treatments, according to his authority, that you cannot refuse. And if you object, according to the interpretation, your objections prove you are insane and need more aggressive treatment. The asylum, according to this analysis, was a tool for enforcing gender norms through medicine. Women who violated expectations, according to the system's response, were redefined as sick and subjected to medical intervention designed to break their will and restore compliance. The treatment, according to its actual purpose, wasn't about healing, it was about control. Now, let's explore specific reasons women were committed, because understanding the range of symptoms reveals how the asylum system functioned as social control. According to admission records analysed by historians, women were committed for an astonishing range of normal behaviours and understandable reactions to difficult circumstances. According to records from the West Virginia Hospital for the Insane compiled in a viral photograph of their admission ledger from the 1860s to 1890s, women were admitted for novel reading, imaginary female trouble, bad whiskey, suppressed menses, gree, desertion by husband, laziness, egotism, jealousy, hysteria, greediness, gathering in the head, rumour of husband murder, Salvation Army, death of sons in war, opium habit, shooting of daughter, female disease, fever and loss of lawsuit, busyness nerves, fell from horse in war, asthma, time of life, deranged masturbation, suppression of menses, marriage of son, seduction and disappointment, bad habits and political excitement, menstrual deranged, and religion and jealousy. Think about those admission reasons. Novel reading got you committed, reading fiction according to medical belief, overstimulated women's delicate nervous systems, time of life, meaning menopause, was an official diagnosis justifying commitment. Desertion by husband led to asylum admission, apparently because being abandoned made you insane rather than being a reasonable cause for distress. Seduction and disappointment, being sexually used and discarded, was treated as madness in the victim rather than a crime by the perpetrator. Some reasons, according to their transparency, aren't even pretending to be about mental illness. Laziness means you didn't work hard enough. Egotism means you had too high an opinion of yourself. Greediness might mean you wanted control over your own money. Political excitement means you had political opinions. Salvation Army apparently means you were too religiously enthusiastic. These, according to their obvious nature, are social judgments disguised as medical diagnoses. Other reasons, according to what they reveal, show women being punished for men's actions or for circumstances beyond their control. Bad whiskey suggests you drank alcohol that made you sick. How is that madness? Bad habits and political excitement together suggests political activity was seen as a bad habit. Rumour of husband murder doesn't even require that you actually murdered anyone. Mere rumour is sufficient. Shooting of daughter might mean you witnessed your daughter being shot. Trauma is apparently insanity. Meet Sophia, committed to an Illinois asylum in 1875 for religious enthusiasm. According to your story, you've become deeply involved in the Methodist Church. You attend services, according to your faith, 3 times a week. You participate, according to your commitment, in Bible study and prayer meetings. You believe, according to your religious conviction, that you've experienced God's grace. You talk, according to your enthusiasm, about your faith with neighbours and family. Your husband, according to his perspective, thinks you are spending too much time at church and not enough time on housework. Your piety, according to his complaint, embarrasses him in front of his drinking friends. He wants, according to his preference, a wife who focuses on domestic duties, not salvation. He consults, according to his decision, with a doctor about your excessive religiosity. The doctor, according to medical theory, diagnoses religious mania. Your enthusiasm for church, according to his interpretation, indicates an unbalanced mind. Your belief in religious experience, according to his materialist framework, is delusion. Your preference for prayer over housework, according to the judgment, shows disordered priorities proving mental illness. You are committed, according to the paperwork, for treatment of your religious mania. In the asylum, according to the treatment, you are forbidden to attend religious services. The asylum has a chaplain, according to the rules, but patients with religious mania aren't allowed to see him because it might reinforce their delusions. When you try to pray, according to the staff's response, you are told to stop. When you quote Bible verses, according to the interpretation, it is recorded as evidence of your ongoing illness. Your faith, according to its redefinition, has been transformed from a constitutional right to a symptom of insanity. Other women, according to admission records, were committed for explicitly gendered reasons that make the social control function obvious. Nymphomania was diagnosed, according to medical records, in women who enjoyed sex, who masturbated, who had sex outside marriage, or who simply refused unwanted sex from their husbands. Hysteria, according to its catch, all nature, could mean almost anything: emotional expression, physical complaints doctors couldn't explain, or simply behaviour the doctor found annoying. Moral insanity, according to Victorian psychiatric diagnosis, was particularly revealing. This diagnosis, according to medical textbooks of the era, meant someone who behaved immorally without showing other obvious symptoms of madness. A woman could be intellectually normal, according to the criteria, but morally insane if she violated social norms. The diagnosis, according to its circular logic, meant you break rules, therefore you are insane. You are insane, therefore we can lock you up. Your objections to being locked up prove you are insane. According to medical records, women were committed for moral insanity, for behaviours like refusing to do housework, wanting to work outside the home, seeking divorce, having opinions about politics, dressing in ways considered too masculine or too sexual, reading books considered inappropriate, writing for publication, speaking in public, joining reform movements, demanding property rights, or expressing interest in women's suffrage. Meet Laura, committed to a Chicago asylum in 1888 for excessive reading. According to your background, you are 26 years old, unmarried, living with your parents. You work, according to your employment, as a clerk in a department store. In your free time, according to your passion, you read voraciously novels, newspapers, magazines, books on science and history. You've taught yourself according to your self-education, more than most university students know. Your father, according to his concern, believes your reading is unhealthy. A woman, according to his views, doesn't need education. Your excessive reading, according to his worry, is making you unmarriageable. You have opinions. You talk about ideas. You are not interested in the domestic arts that would make you a good wife. He has tried, according to his attempts, to limit your access to books. You've continued, according to your defiance, to sneak books and read in secret. Your father consults, according to his decision, with the family doctor. The doctor, according to medical theory, explains that excessive mental stimulation in women can lead to nervous exhaustion and hysteria. Your reading, according to the diagnosis, has overexcited your brain at the expense of your reproductive organs. The cure, according to the prescription, is asylum treatment with complete mental rest. You need, according to medical advice, to be prevented from reading until your mind recovers. You are committed, according to the paperwork, for hysteria caused by excessive mental stimulation. In the asylum, according to the treatment, you are forbidden all reading material. When you beg, according to your desperation, for even a newspaper, you are told that reading caused your illness and must be avoided during your cure. The enforced intellectual deprivation, according to the reality, drives you to genuine despair. Your mind, according to its needs, is starving for stimulation. The cure, according to its effects, is creating the very mental disturbance it claims to treat. The asylum's treatment of intellectual women, according to the pattern, reveals the system's function clearly. Women who sought education, who engaged with ideas, who wanted intellectual lives, according to medical interpretation, were seen as sick. The sickness, according to the diagnosis, required treatment that would break their intellectual interests and redirect them toward proper feminine concerns. The asylum, according to this function, was a re-education camp designed to enforce gender conformity through medical authority. Other women, according to admission records, were committed for being too independent. This diagnosis, according to its application, covered women who wanted to live alone, women who supported themselves financially, women who travelled without male escorts, women who made their own decisions. Independence in women, according to Victorian medical theory, was unnatural and therefore pathological. Meet Anna, committed to a New York asylum in 1895 for refusing to marry. According to your situation, you are 30 years old, the daughter of a wealthy merchant. Your father, according to his plans, has arranged a marriage for you to a business associate. The man, according to your assessment, is twice your age and known for drinking heavily. You refuse, according to your right, to marry him. Your father, according to his rage, cannot accept your refusal. The marriage, according to his business interests, would solidify an important commercial alliance. Your objections, according to his view, are irrelevant. A daughter, according to his beliefs, has a duty to obey her father's decisions about her marriage. Your continued refusal, according to his conclusion, must indicate mental instability. No sane woman would refuse a financially advantageous marriage. He has you examined according to the process by a doctor who is also a business associate. The examination, according to its brevity, lasts 15 minutes. The doctor asks you, according to his questions, why you refuse the marriage. You explain, according to your honest answer, that you don't love the man, that you've heard he beats his current wife, that you don't want to marry at all because you value your independence. Your answer, according to the diagnosis, confirms mental illness. Not wanting to marry, according to medical understanding, indicates hysteria or moral insanity. Your concerns about the man's character, according to the interpretation, are paranoid delusions. A respectable businessman wouldn't beat his wife. Your desire for independence, according to the assessment, is unnatural in a woman and indicates disordered thinking. You are committed, according to the papers, for treatment of your hysteria and delusions. In the asylum, according to the treatment approach, doctors try to cure you by convincing you to accept proper feminine roles. You are lectured, according to the therapy, on women's duty to marry and obey. You are told, according to the medical advice, that your resistance to marriage is a symptom of your illness. When you continue to insist, according to your persistence, that you don't want to marry, this is taken as evidence that you are still sick. The cure, according to its goal, won't be complete until you agree to submit to your father's will. Think about what this meant in practice. You could be, according to the criteria, intelligent, rational, fully capable of reasoning and conversation. But if you wanted, according to your desires, things that challenged gender norms, education, career independence, political rights, you could be diagnosed as morally insane. The diagnosis, according to its function, wasn't about describing mental illness. It was about medicalizing social deviance. The economic dimension of asylum commitment, according to further analysis, created perverse incentives throughout the system. Asylum superintendents, according to their salaries, were often paid based on the number of patients they housed. The more patients, according to the compensation, the more income for the institution and its director. This created, according to the incentive structure, motivation to keep admission standards low and to retain patients as long as possible. Some private asylums, according to business practices, actively advertised their services to families seeking to commit relatives. The advertisements, according to their messaging, emphasize discretion, quick admission, and comfortable accommodations. These asylums, according to their business model, catered to wealthy families who wanted to quietly dispose of inconvenient women without the scandal of a public legal proceeding. Meet Dr. Henry Cotton, superintendent of Trenton State Hospital in New Jersey in the early 20th century. According to his medical theories, mental illness was caused by bacterial infections from various body parts. The cure, according to his treatment, was surgical removal of the supposedly infected organs. He performed, according to medical records, thousands of operations, removing teeth, tonsils, colons, stomachs, spleens, and reproductive organs from mental patients. Cotton's patients, according to mortality statistics, died at appalling rates from these surgeries. The mortality rate, according to documented figures, was as high as 45% for some procedures. But Cotton, according to his claims, reported cure rates of 85%. He was, according to his professional reputation, celebrated as a pioneer of innovative treatment. The reality, according to later investigation, was that he was a butcher who mutilated and killed hundreds of patients while claiming therapeutic success. Cotton's story, according to its lessons, illustrates broader problems in asylum medicine. Superintendents had, according to institutional structure, almost complete autonomy. They could, according to their authority, implement whatever treatments they wished with minimal oversight. Patients had, according to their powerlessness, no ability to refuse treatment. The combination, according to its inevitable outcome, was ripe for abuse and pseudo-scientific experimentation. Think about being a patient under Cotton's care. You are committed, according to the admission, for depression following a miscarriage. Cotton examines you, according to his theory, and decides your depression is caused by infected teeth. You are taken, according to the procedure, to the surgical room. All your teeth, according to the treatment, are extracted without adequate anesthesia. You are in agony, according to the pain, for days afterward. But according to Cotton's assessment, you are still depressed, understandably, given the trauma you've just experienced. But he interprets it as evidence the infection remains. The next surgery, according to his protocol, removes your tonsils, then your cervix, then portions of your colon. Each surgery, according to the repeated trauma, makes you worse. But Cotton, according to his interpretation, sees your deterioration as proof that he hasn't yet found all the infection. The treatment, according to its logic, can never fail, it can only be insufficiently applied. The use of restraints and solitary confinement, according to widespread practices, was another area of terrible abuse. Restraints, according to official justification, were supposed to be used only when patients posed immediate danger to themselves or others. According to actual practice, they were used for punishment, convenience, and control. The camisole or straitjacket, according to its design, immobilized the arms by tying them behind the back or across the chest. Patients could be kept in camisoles, according to asylum records, for days, weeks, or even months. The restraint, according to its physical effects, caused severe pain in shoulders and arms, circulation problems, leading to tissue damage, muscle atrophy from disuse, and skin breakdown from constant pressure. Some asylums, according to their inventories, had muffs, thick canvas mittens that prevented use of hands. Patients' hands, according to the procedure, were placed in the muffs which were then locked. This prevented, according to the function, any fine motor activity, including writing, eating without assistance, or personal hygiene. Women wearing muffs, according to the degradation, had to be fed like infants and couldn't clean themselves after using the toilet. Restraining chairs, according to asylum equipment, strapped patients into seated positions. The straps, according to the design, went across chest, arms, waist, thighs, ankles. A patient in a restraining chair, according to the immobility, couldn't move anything except their head. They could be left, according to recorded durations, in these chairs for entire days. The inability to move, according to physiological effects, cause terrible muscle cramps, circulation problems, and eventually pressure sores. Meet Florence, restrained at a London asylum in 1895. According to the incident that triggered this, you complained at breakfast that the porridge was mouldy. The attendant, according to her response, told you to eat it anyway. You refused according to your reasonable objection. She slapped you according to her violence. You raised your hand according to your defensive reaction to protect yourself. That defensive gesture, according to the interpretation, was assault on staff. You are dragged according to the punishment to a punishment cell. They force you, according to the procedure, into a camisole, strap you into a restraining chair, and leave you. You are left, according to the duration, in this position for 48 hours. You cannot move according to the immobility. You cannot sleep according to the discomfort in any meaningful way. You can only doze fitfully while held rigidly upright. You soil yourself according to bodily functions because you cannot reach the toilet. No one, according to the neglect, comes to clean you. When they finally release you, according to the aftermath, you cannot walk. Your legs, according to the prolonged immobilization, don't work properly. Your arms, according to the restraint's effects, are numb and won't respond. You have deep pressure sores, according to the damage, on your back and buttocks. You've developed, according to the hygiene, a severe infection from sitting in your own waste. The punishment, according to its severity, has left you with injuries that take months to heal. Solitary confinement, according to another common punishment, meant being locked alone in a small cell. The cells, according to descriptions by investigators, were often bare rooms with stone walls, a straw mattress on the floor, a bucket for waste, and nothing else. No windows according to the design, or only a small barred opening high on the wall. No light according to the darkness, except what came through the door crack. No stimulation according to the sensory deprivation of any kind. Patients could be kept in solitary according to documented cases for weeks or months. The isolation, according to modern psychological research, is profoundly damaging. Humans are social animals according to our nature. Extended isolation, according to its effects, causes hallucinations, paranoia, depression, and lasting psychological damage. The treatment, according to its reality, was torture that caused the very symptoms it claimed to address. The forced feeding of patients who refused to eat, according to another brutal practice, was common. Some women, according to their protest or despair, stopped eating as an act of resistance or because depression had taken their appetite. The asylum's response, according to its protocol, was to force food into them by any means necessary. The procedure, according to its description in medical texts, involved holding the patient down while an attendant forced a tube through her nose or mouth into her stomach. Food, usually a thin gruel or milk, was then poured through the tube. The process, according to patient accounts, was terrifying and painful. The tube, according to its insertion, often caused gagging, choking, nosebleeds, and vomiting. If the tube was placed incorrectly, according to the danger, food could go into the lungs, causing aspiration pneumonia. Meet Edith, force-fed at a California asylum in 1910. According to your situation, you've been in the asylum for 6 months. You were committed, according to the admission, for postpartum depression after your baby died. The depression, according to its severity, has taken your will to live. You've stopped eating, according to your despair, because you don't want to continue living. The staff, according to their interpretation, see your refusal to eat as willful disobedience rather than a symptom of depression. They decide, according to the protocol, to force feed you. 4 attendants, according to the procedure, hold you down on a bed. A doctor, according to his role, pushes a rubber tube up your nose. You gag and struggle according to your reaction. They hold you tighter according to their force. The tube goes down your throat according to the insertion. You are choking according to the sensation. You can't breathe, according to the panic. The doctor pours, according to the feeding, a mixture of milk and raw eggs through the tube. You vomit, according to your body's rejection, but they hold the tube in place. The vomit comes up according to the danger around the tube. You are aspirating according to what is happening, choking on your own vomit. They continue, according to the procedure, until the entire mixture has been poured in. Then they pull out the tube, according to the removal. You lie gasping, according to the aftermath, with your nose bleeding and your throat raw. This happens, according to the repetition, 3 times a day for 2 weeks. You develop, according to the complications, a severe respiratory infection from aspirating food and vomit. The infection, according to its progression, turns into pneumonia. You nearly die, according to the severity. The force feeding, according to its claim, was to keep you alive. According to reality, it almost killed you and traumatized you further. The use of sedatives and restraints together, according to another dangerous practice, was common. Patients who were agitated or difficult to manage, according to asylum solutions, were given large doses of chloral hydrate, morphine, or other sedatives, then placed in restraints. The combination, according to medical danger, was potentially lethal. Sedatives depress breathing and heart rate. Restraints can restrict breathing further. The combination, according to documented deaths, killed patients through respiratory failure. The lack of patient consent, according to the ethical void, was absolute. Patients had, according to their legal status once committed, no right to refuse any treatment. Doctors could, according to their authority, perform any procedure, administer any drug, apply any restraint without asking permission. The patient's wishes, according to the legal framework, were irrelevant. This created, according to the inevitable outcome, an environment where patients were objects to be managed rather than people to be consulted. Now let's explore the living conditions in more detail, because understanding the daily environment reveals how asylums destroyed people through neglect and dehumanization, even without active abuse. According to investigative reports, the conditions ranged from merely grim to actively dangerous. Overcrowding, according to institutional records, was severe in most asylums. Buildings designed for 200 patients, according to the reality, might house 500 or more. The overflow, according to common practices, meant patients sleeping in hallways, storage rooms, and basements. Some patients, according to documented conditions, had no beds at all and slept on the floor. The lack of adequate bathing facilities, according to sanitation problems, created health hazards. One bathtub, according to typical ratios, might serve 100 patients. Patients bathed, according to the schedule, perhaps once a week. The same bath water, according to the economy, was used for multiple patients. The spread of skin diseases, lice, and other contagious conditions, according to the inevitable result, was rampant. Toilet facilities, according to descriptions, were inadequate and degrading. Long rows of toilets, according to the arrangement, in large rooms without privacy partitions. Insufficient numbers, according to the shortage, meant long waits and frequent accidents. The smell, according to observers' accounts, was overwhelming. The lack of proper sewage systems, according to the consequences, meant waste disposal was often primitive and unsanitary. The heating in winter, according to reform reports, was often insufficient. Patients, according to the cold, suffered in poorly heated wards. Frostbite, according to recorded cases, was not uncommon. Some patients, according to the inadequate bedding, had only thin blankets even in the coldest weather. The cold, according to its effects, exacerbated illnesses and caused additional suffering. Ventilation, according to the opposite problem, was poor. Windows were often kept closed, according to security concerns, because they were potential escape routes. The air, according to the resulting stuffiness, in crowded wards was foul, a mixture of body odour, waste, illness, and inadequate air circulation. The poor air quality, according to health impacts, contributed to the spread of tuberculosis and other respiratory diseases that killed many asylum patients. The food, according to its quality across most institutions, was barely adequate for survival, and sometimes worse. The meals, according to budget constraints, were kept as cheap as possible. Breakfast, according to typical menus, might be thin porridge and hard bread. Lunch, according to the meals, might be watery soup with a few vegetables and a small piece of meat or fish. Dinner, according to the repetition, was similar to lunch. The food, according to its nutritional value, was insufficient to maintain health, especially for patients who needed more calories due to mental agitation or physical illness. Some asylums, according to particularly bad cases, served food that was literally spoiled. Moldy bread, according to documented complaints, rancid butter, meat that was going bad. Patients who complained, according to the response, were told they were lucky to get anything or were punished for being ungrateful. The malnutrition, according to its effects, weakened patients and made them more susceptible to disease. The clothing provided according to asylum economy was minimal and often inadequate. Patients wore, according to the garments, shapeless institutional dresses or gowns. The clothing, according to its quality, was made from rough, cheap fabric. Undergarments, according to the provision, were often insufficient or absent. In winter, according to the cold, many patients lacked adequate warm clothing. The lack of personal possessions, according to institutional rules, stripped patients of identity and dignity. Your own clothes, according to the intake procedure, were taken when you arrived. Personal items, according to confiscation, were removed. Books, writing materials, jewelry, keepsakes. You own nothing, according to the regime. Every item you used, clothing, towel, eating utensils, belonged to the institution. The depersonalization, according to psychological impact, was profound. Think about what it means to own nothing, to have nothing of your own. You can't, according to the restrictions, keep a letter from a family member. You can't, according to the prohibitions, have a photograph of your children. You can't, according to the rules, possess a book you treasure. Every connection to your former identity, according to the erasure, is severed. You become, according to the process, just another patient in an institution with no individual identity. The lack of meaningful activity, according to another problem, meant patients spent days, weeks, years doing nothing. The moral treatment philosophy, according to its original intention, had emphasized useful work as therapeutic, but according to actual practice in most asylums, patients were simply warehoused with nothing to do. Some asylums, according to labor exploitation, used patients as unpaid workers. The most functional patients, according to this arrangement, worked in the asylum's laundry, kitchen, farm, or workshops. They provided, according to the economics, free labor that kept operating costs down. The work, according to its justification, was called therapeutic. But according to reality, it was economic exploitation of captive labor. The complete lack of privacy, according to institutional life, was another source of degradation. You were, according to constant supervision, watched at all times. Attendants could, according to their authority, enter any space without knocking. Other patients, according to the crowding, were always around you. You could not, according to the impossibility, ever be alone. The constant exposure, according to psychological impact, was exhausting and dehumanizing. Now let's examine the particular vulnerability of women who had no family to advocate for them. Poor women, elderly women, immigrant women without family connections, according to their isolation, were especially powerless. They had, according to their situation, no one to write to, no one to visit, no one to pressure the asylum for their release. They could, according to the danger, disappear into the asylum system and literally never be heard from again. Meet Catherine, an elderly Irish immigrant committed to a Boston asylum in 1900. According to your background, you arrived in America 50 years ago as a young woman. You worked according to your life, as a domestic servant your entire life. You never married according to your circumstances. You have, according to family ties, no children and no relatives in America. Your family back in Ireland, according to the likelihood, are probably dead. At age 70, according to your situation, you became too frail to work. Your employer, according to the decision, dismissed you. You had, according to your finances, no savings and no pension. You ended up, according to the descent into poverty, living in a charity house for poor women. The conditions, according to the setting, were grim, overcrowded, cold, inadequate food. You became, according to natural age-related changes, forgetful and sometimes confused. The charity house director, according to the administrative decision, decided you needed asylum care. You were transferred, according to the paperwork, to the state asylum for the insane. You had, according to the absence of advocates, no one to object or question the commitment. No doctor examined you, according to the lack of medical assessment, to determine if you were actually mentally ill or just elderly and confused. In the asylum, according to your fate, you are placed in a ward with severely mentally ill patients. You are frightened, according to your reaction, by the chaos and violence around you. You ask, according to your attempts, when you can go home. The staff, according to their response, tell you that you are home. This is where you live now. You have nowhere else, according to the reality. No family, according to your isolation. No money, according to your poverty. No home, according to the loss of everything. You die, according to death records, 2 years later. The cause of death, according to the certificate, is listed as senile dementia. But according to medical reality, you probably just died of old age, malnutrition, and despair in an institution where you never should have been. Your death, according to bureaucratic procedure, is noted in the asylum's records. Your body, according to its fate, is buried in the asylum's potter's field, in an unmarked grave with dozens of other unclaimed patients. Your life, according to its end, is erased as if you never existed. Stories like Catherine's, according to their frequency, were common. Elderly women with nowhere else to go, according to the practice, were often sent to asylums simply because they needed care and there was nowhere else that would take them. The asylum, according to this function, served as a combination of nursing home, homeless shelter, and prison for poor women who had committed no crime other than being old, poor, and alone. Now let's discuss the rare escapes and how some women managed to get out. Escape, according to its difficulty, required extraordinary luck, determination, and usually outside help. The legal barriers, according to their height, were formidable. The social barriers, according to credibility, were severe. Who would believe someone declared insane? Some women escaped, according to the physical method, by literally fleeing the asylum. They waited, according to the strategy, for moments of opportunity, during outdoor exercise, during transfers, during moments of inadequate supervision. They ran, according to the desperation, knowing they might be caught and severely punished. A few, according to the successful ones, made it outside the asylum grounds and managed to find help before being recaptured. Meet Adeline T.P. Lunt, whose story of escape, according to her published account, reveals both the possibility and the difficulty. Adeline was committed, according to her circumstances, to Illinois State Hospital for the Insane in 1875 by her husband. She was, according to her mental state, completely sane. Her husband wanted her committed, according to the motive, to take control of her inheritance. Adeline knew, according to her strategy, that she needed outside help. She managed, according to her resourcefulness, to write a letter to a judge she had known before her commitment. She smuggled, according to the method, the letter out through a sympathetic attendant. The judge, according to his response, investigated her case. He found, according to his assessment, that she was clearly sane and had been wrongfully committed. But according to the legal barriers, even with the judge's help, getting her released took months of legal maneuvering. The asylum superintendent, according to his resistance, insisted she was insane and needed continued treatment. Her husband, according to his opposition, fought her release. The legal battle, according to its duration, required extensive court proceedings. She was finally released, according to the victory, after proving her sanity in a jury trial. Adeline's escape, according to its requirements, succeeded because she had specific advantages. She was white, educated, articulate, had some influential connections, and had the mental and emotional strength to persist in fighting. Poor women, immigrant women, women without education or connections, according to their disadvantages, lacked these resources. Their escapes, according to the difficulty, were nearly impossible. Other women, according to a different strategy, tried to prove their sanity through perfect behavior and compliance. They reasoned, according to this approach, that if they demonstrated they were rational and cooperative, they would be released. But according to the system's logic, this often backfired. Perfect behavior, according to medical interpretation, could be seen as evidence of cunning, the ability to hide symptoms, or it might be taken, according to another interpretation, as merely a temporary improvement that could relapse at any time. Some women, according to their tragic choice, didn't want to escape. After years in the asylum, according to institutionalization's effects, they had no life to return to. Their marriages were over, according to abandonment or divorce. Their children were grown and didn't know them, according to the separation. They had no skills for employment, according to the years lost. They had nowhere to live, according to homelessness. The asylum, according to the terrible reality, had become the only home they had. Think about what this means. The system, according to its totality, doesn't just imprison you physically. It destroys, according to its operation over time, all possibility of return to normal life. Your family, according to the years apart, has moved on without you. Your children, according to the alienation, have been told you are sick and dangerous. Your friends, according to social stigma, have forgotten you or avoid association with someone who was insane. By the time you might be released, according to the damage done, you have nothing and no one to return to. The asylum, according to its long-term effects, creates dependency. After years of having every aspect of life controlled, according to institutional adaptation, many patients lost the ability to make decisions or function independently. Released patients, according to documented outcomes, often struggled with basic tasks like managing money, finding housing, or maintaining employment. The institution, according to its damage, disabled people even if they had been functional before commitment. Now let's examine how the women's rights movement connected asylum reform to broader fights for women's freedom. According to feminist activists of the era, wrongful asylum commitment was connected to all the ways women were denied autonomy and legal rights. The ability to lock away inconvenient women, according to suffragist analysis, stemmed from the same power structure that denied women the vote, property rights, and legal personhood. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, according to her writings on asylum abuse, argued that women would continue to be vulnerable to wrongful commitment as long as they lacked legal rights. The solution, according to her position, wasn't just asylum reform but complete legal equality for women. When women had the vote, according to the argument, they could elect lawmakers who would protect their rights. When women had property rights, according to the reasoning, they couldn't be robbed through false diagnosis. When women had equal status in marriage, according to the logic, husbands couldn't use medical authority to dispose of wives. Susan B. Anthony, according to her advocacy, worked on specific asylum cases, helping families try to secure release of wrongfully committed women. She understood, according to her analysis, that the medical profession's power over women's bodies was connected to broader patterns of male control. Doctors declaring women insane for disobedience, according to her critique, was not fundamentally different from laws that gave husbands control over wives' bodies and properties. The women's rights newspapers, according to their coverage, reported extensively on asylum abuse cases. The Lily, the Revolution, and Woman's Journal, according to their journalism, published stories of wrongfully committed women, and advocated for legal reform. These publications, according to their impact, helped build public awareness and support for asylum reform legislation. Some suffragists, according to their analysis, saw direct parallels between asylum commitment and marriage laws. In both systems, according to the structure, a woman's legal status depended on male authority. A husband could commit his wife, according to the law, just as he controlled her property and had legal rights over her body. The asylum, according to this feminist critique, was the ultimate expression of coverture, the legal doctrine that made married women legally non-existent. Think about how trapped women were by interconnected systems of control. You lack, according to Victorian law, the vote. You cannot, according to property restrictions, own property in your own name if you are married. You cannot, according to marriage law, refuse your husband sexually. You cannot, according to custody law, keep your children if you leave your husband. You cannot, according to commitment law, prevent yourself from being declared insane and locked away. Every system, according to the pattern, depends on male authority over you, and if you challenge any part according to the consequence, you can be diagnosed as mentally ill and removed from society. Now let's examine the asylum's daily routines and how they broke women's spirits. According to accounts by patients and reformers, asylum life was designed to enforce absolute obedience and crush individual will. The routines, according to their structure, eliminated all choice, privacy, and dignity. Your day, according to the schedule at a typical asylum, follows rigid routine. You wake when told, eat when told, sleep when told. You wear, according to asylum clothing, shapeless institutional dresses. Your own clothes, according to the rules, were taken when you arrived. Your hair, according to regulations, may have been cut short without your consent, because long hair is harder for staff to manage. You owe nothing, according to the system. Every object, every moment of your day, is controlled by the institution. You eat, according to the procedure, in a large dining hall with hundreds of other patients. The noise, according to the environment, is overwhelming shouting, crying, laughing, the clatter of tin plates and cups. The food, according to its quality, is barely edible institutional fare. But you eat it, according to your hunger, because there is nothing else. Refusing to eat, according to the consequences, results in force feeding. Attendants hold you down and push a tube down your throat. After meals, according to the schedule, you are locked in the day room, or, if the weather permits, herded into a yard for exercise. The yard, according to its features, is a bare dirt or grass enclosure surrounded by high walls. You walk, according to the activity, in circles with the other women. No games, according to the rules, because they might cause excitement. No running, according to the restrictions, because it is not ladylike. Just walking in circles like animals in a pen. The bathroom facilities, according to descriptions by investigative journalists, are degrading. You have no privacy, according to the setup. Toilets are, according to asylum architecture, arranged in rows in large rooms. You defecate and urinate, according to the conditions, in full view of dozens of other women and the attendants who supervise to prevent suicide attempts. Bathing, according to the procedure, happens once a week in large communal tubs. Multiple women, according to the practice, use the same bath water. The attendants, according to their control, watch you bathe. At night, according to the sleeping arrangements, you are locked in the ward. If you can't sleep according to your options, there is nothing to do. The lights, according to the schedule, are turned off at a set time. You lie in darkness according to the hours until morning, listening to the other women, some crying, some screaming, some talking to themselves, some lying as silent and despairing as you. If you cause any trouble, according to asylum discipline, you are punished. Punishments, according to institutional records, include solitary confinement in a cell, restraints, beatings, withdrawal of food, forced sedation with chloral hydrate or morphine, and transfer to the violent ward where conditions are even worse. What constitutes trouble, according to staff discretion, can be anything: talking back, crying too much, refusing to work, or simply annoying an attendant. The restraints, according to their design, are particularly cruel. The camisole or straight waistcoat, what we call a straitjacket, according to its construction, is a canvas jacket with long sleeves that tie behind your back, immobilizing your arms. You can be kept in a camisole, according to asylum records, for days or weeks. The restraint, according to its physical effects, causes shoulder pain, circulation problems, and muscle atrophy. The psychological effect, according to modern understanding, is profound helplessness and terror. Some asylums, according to their equipment, used cribs cage, like beds with lids that locked. You are placed inside, according to the procedure, and the lid is closed over you. You can't stand up, according to the confinement, or turn over. You lie, according to the hours or days, in a cage like an animal. The crib, according to its justification, prevents you from harming yourself or others. According to its reality, it is torture that causes panic, claustrophobia, and lasting trauma. Meet Mary, placed in restraints at a London asylum in 1882. According to the incident that triggered this, you became upset during dinner. Another patient, according to what happened, grabbed food from your plate. You objected, according to your reasonable response. The attendant, according to her interpretation, said you were causing a disturbance. You tried to explain according to your defense, but the attendant ordered you to be quiet. When you kept trying to explain according to the escalation, she called for assistance. 2 attendants, according to the procedure, grabbed you and dragged you to a side room. They forced, according to the physical struggle, your arms into a camisole and tied it tight behind your back. Then they put you, according to the full restraint protocol, in a crib and locked the lid. You are lying on your back according to your position, unable to move, in a locked cage. The attendants leave according to the next step and turn off the light. You are in darkness, according to the sensory experience, unable to move or see. You can barely breathe according to the tightness of the camisole. Your shoulders, according to the strain, are already aching from the unnatural position. You are terrified, according to your emotional state, that you'll be left here indefinitely. You have no way to know, according to your helplessness, when or if anyone will come back. You are kept in the crib, according to the duration, for 36 hours. You urinate on yourself, according to bodily functions you can't control, multiple times. You develop bed sores, according to the inability to shift position. Your shoulder joints, according to the restraint's effects, are severely damaged. When they finally release you, according to the aftermath, you can barely walk. You've learned, according to the lesson the punishment taught, never to object to anything again. Your spirit, according to the intended effect, has been broken. Now let's explore how difficult it was to get out once you were committed. According to legal historians, the laws made proving your sanity nearly impossible. The system, according to its design, assumed that once labelled insane, you remained insane unless doctors decided otherwise. And the doctors, according to their incentives, rarely decided patients were ready for release. According to the legal framework, you couldn't simply declare yourself sane and demand release. Your own testimony, according to the reasoning, was worthless because insane people don't recognize their own insanity. If you insisted you were sane according to the interpretation, that was proof of your delusion. If you admitted you had been insane according to the catch -22, you were probably still insane. There was no winning response. Getting a lawyer was, according to the obstacles, nearly impossible. You had no money, according to your legal status, because you were declared incompetent and couldn't control your own funds. You couldn't write letters, according to asylum rules, without staff approval. Letters, according to the censorship, were read by staff and could be confiscated if deemed inappropriate. Even if you got a letter out, according to the credibility problem, who would believe the claims of someone certified as insane. Some women, according to determined efforts, tried to prove their sanity through perfect compliance. They reasoned, according to this strategy, that if they followed every rule and showed no symptoms, they'd be released. But according to the system's logic, this strategy backfired. Your perfect compliance, according to medical interpretation, could be seen as cunning. You were clever enough to hide your insanity. Your calm behavior, according to alternative diagnosis, might be evidence of moral insanity rather than sanity. You couldn't win. Meet Clarissa Lathrop, whose case illustrates the difficulty of escape. According to her story documented in court records, she was committed by her husband to an Illinois asylum in 1869 for domestic insubordination, meaning she argued with him about household management. She was, according to all evidence, completely sane. She tried, according to her strategy, every possible avenue to prove her sanity and gain release. She obeyed every rule perfectly, according to her behavior record. The asylum staff, according to their notes, described her as quiet, cooperative, and showing no symptoms of mental illness. But this, according to the doctor's interpretation, just meant her particular form of insanity was in remission, not that she was cured. She was kept in the asylum, according to the decision, for her own protection. She wrote letters according to her efforts to lawyers, judges, and her family members other than her husband. Most letters, according to asylum censorship, never left the institution. The few that did, according to the responses, were dismissed because they came from someone certified insane. Her claims that she was wrongfully committed, according to recipients' interpretation, were exactly what a paranoid person would say. She requested, according to legal procedures, a hearing to determine her mental state. The request was denied, according to the doctor's authority, because the asylum physician had already determined she was insane, and his judgment was considered sufficient. She had no right, according to the law, to challenge his medical opinion. She was finally released, according to the outcome, after 2 years, not because anyone accepted she was sane, but because her husband died and his relatives didn't want to keep paying for her institutionalization. She left the asylum, according to her experience, with her reputation destroyed, her property gone, and psychological trauma that lasted the rest of her life. According to statistics compiled by reformers, the average length of stay for women in Victorian asylums was 7 years. Many women, according to death records, died in asylums after decades of confinement. The cause of death, according to medical records, was often listed as the original mental illness, but according to modern analysis of symptoms, many died from tuberculosis, malnutrition, injuries from restraints or staff violence, or complications from harmful treatments. Now let's examine the role of families in committing women, because understanding family dynamics reveals another layer of the asylum system's function. According to sociological analysis, families used asylums to solve problems that were often economic or about power rather than about actual mental illness. Inconvenient wives, according to one common pattern, were committed by husbands who wanted new partners or who found their wives' behavior embarrassing or inconvenient. The husband, according to his legal authority, had complete control over his wife. If she challenged his authority according to his options, he could declare her insane and have her locked away. The asylum, according to this function, was a kind of legal murder. The wife disappeared from family and social life as completely as if she'd died, but the husband avoided the legal consequences of actual murder. Wealthy widows, according to another pattern, were sometimes committed by adult children or other relatives who wanted access to their inheritance. An elderly woman who controlled money, according to the threat she posed, might refuse to give it to relatives who felt entitled to it. Declaring her mentally incompetent, according to the solution, allowed the relatives to take control of her finances. The asylum, according to this function, was a tool for financial exploitation. Daughters who refused arranged marriages, according to another pattern, were sometimes committed by parents determined to control them. a daughter who wanted to marry someone the parents didn't approve of, according to the problem, could embarrass the family or make an unsuitable match. Commitment, according to the remedy, removed her from society until she either agreed to obey or was broken by the asylum experience. Meet Emily, a wealthy widow committed by her stepson in 1875. According to your situation, your husband died 6 months ago, leaving you his entire estate. The will, according to its terms, gave you complete control of a substantial fortune. Your adult stepson, according to his expectation, assumed your husband meant for the money to pass through you to him. But you, according to your right, have your own plans for the money. You want to use it, according to your intention, to support women's education. Your stepson, according to his response, is furious. The money, according to his belief, should be his. Your plan to give it to a women's college, according to his view, is wasteful and ridiculous. He tries, according to his persuasion attempts, to change your mind. You refuse, according to your determination. He threatens, according to the escalation, to have you declared incompetent if you don't cooperate. You laugh, according to your response, because you think he is bluffing. You are 52 years old, according to your age, in good health, managing the estate competently. On what grounds, according to your reasoning, could anyone declare you incompetent? But you, according to your understanding of the law, underestimate Victorian legal bias against women and the power of male relatives. Your stepson consults, according to his strategy, with 2 doctors who are his friends. He tells them, according to his claims, that you've been acting strangely since your husband's death. You've become, according to his description, obsessed with radical ideas about women's rights. You are planning, according to his characterization, to waste the family fortune on inappropriate causes. This behavior, according to his argument, suggests mental instability brought on by grief and the stress of managing finances beyond a woman's capacity. The doctors examine you, according to the procedure, in one brief interview. They ask, according to their questions, about your plans for the estate. You explain, according to your honest response, that you want to endow a women's college. This plan, according to their interpretation, confirms your stepson's claims. A rational woman, according to their assumptions, wouldn't give money to women's education when male relatives need it. Your persistence in this plan, according to the diagnosis, indicates monomania, obsession with one irrational idea. You are committed, according to the legal process. Within a week, your stepson becomes, according to the court's decision, the administrator of the estate while you are judged incompetent. The money you wanted for women's education, according to what happens to it, goes to your stepson. You are locked in an asylum, according to the outcome, not because you are mentally ill, but because you had money and opinions, and a male relative who wanted to control both. According to economic historians studying Victorian property law, women's property was a major factor in commitment decisions. When women gained more property rights in the late 19th century through Married Women's Property Acts, according to the backlash, commitment of women for financial reasons actually increased initially. Men who could no longer legally control women's property directly, according to the adaptation, used medical authority to gain control indirectly. The asylum system, according to this analysis, served economic functions that had nothing to do with mental health care. It was, according to its operation, a legal mechanism for transferring property and power from women to men. The medical diagnosis, according to its function, provided legitimate-seeming justification for what was actually theft. Now, let's explore the few women who escaped and exposed asylum conditions. Their testimony, according to historical impact, sparked reform movements and public outrage. But according to the tragedy, reform came slowly and many of the worst practices continued into the 20th century. Nellie Bly, according to her famous investigation, went undercover in 1887 to expose conditions at the New York City Lunatic Asylum on Blackwell's Island. She was, according to her background, a 23-year-old journalist working for the New York World. She pretended, according to her plan, to be mentally ill to get herself committed. Once inside, according to her mission, she documented everything she experienced. Her published account, 10 Days in a Madhouse, according to its revelations, shocked the nation. She described, according to her observations, freezing cold wards where patients had no adequate heating. She documented, according to the record, filthy conditions where patients were forced to use the same bathwater and towels. She reported, according to what she witnessed, brutal attendants who beat patients and taunted them. She detailed, according to the food situation, meals that were inedible and insufficient. But most shocking, according to Bly's findings, was that most of the women she met were clearly sane. Many, according to their stories, were immigrants who spoke little English and had been committed because they seemed confused. Others, according to Bly's assessment, were simply poor women with nowhere else to go. Some, according to what she discovered, had been committed by relatives who wanted them out of the way. Very few, according to her observation, showed evidence of serious mental illness. Bly's exposé, according to its impact, led to a grand jury investigation and increased funding for asylum improvements. But according to the limits of reform, the fundamental problems, the ease of commitment, the lack of legal rights for patients, the power of male relatives and doctors, remained largely unchanged. Conditions improved in some asylums, according to the outcomes, but many others continued operating with the same abuses Bly had documented. Elizabeth Packard, according to her activism after her release, campaigned tirelessly for legal reform. She published, according to her writings, multiple books describing asylum conditions and arguing for patients' rights. She lobbied, according to her political work, state legislatures to pass laws requiring jury trials before commitment. Her efforts, according to legislative outcomes, succeeded in several states. Illinois, Iowa, Maine, and Massachusetts, according to the laws passed, adopted Packard laws requiring jury trial or other safeguards before commitment. But according to the resistance, many states refused to adopt such laws. Doctors' professional organizations, according to their opposition, argued that legal requirements interfered with medical judgment. Families, according to their interests, wanted to maintain the ability to commit relatives quickly and quietly. The asylum industry itself, according to financial motives, had incentive to keep admissions easy and releases difficult. Think about the economics. An asylum, according to its business model, received payment for each patient it housed. The payment, according to funding sources, came from patients' families if they could pay, and from state funds for poor patients. Either way, according to the incentive structure, the asylum made money by keeping beds filled. Releasing patients, according to the economic impact, reduced revenue. The asylum, according to its financial interest, benefited from keeping people committed as long as possible. The attendants and doctors, according to their labor incentives, also benefited from compliant patients who didn't challenge the system. Patients who demanded their rights, according to the staff's perspective, were troublesome. Patients who accepted their situation, according to the preference, were easier to manage. The system, according to its structure, rewarded cooperation with slightly better treatment and punished assertion of rights with harsher conditions. This created, according to the effect, powerful pressure to submit and stop fighting for release. Now let's examine how the asylum system intersected with other forms of marginalization. Poor women, immigrant women, and women of color, according to demographic analysis, faced even worse treatment than white middle-class women. Their stories, according to historical records, are less well documented because they had fewer resources to fight back and less social power to make their stories heard. Poor women, according to commitment patterns, were often sent to state asylums that were severely overcrowded and underfunded. The conditions, according to investigative reports, were far worse than private asylums serving wealthy patients. Where a private asylum might have, according to the comparison, 1 attendant per 10 patients, state asylums had 1 attendant per 50 or more patients. Where private asylums served, according to the food, adequate if plain meals, state asylums served barely edible slop. Immigrant women, according to language barriers, faced particular vulnerability. A woman who spoke little English, according to the interpretation of her behaviour, might seem confused or unresponsive to doctors. Her attempts to explain herself, according to misunderstanding, might be seen as incoherent babbling. Cultural differences, according to medical ignorance, might be interpreted as symptoms of mental illness. Meet Bridget, an Irish immigrant committed to a Boston asylum in 1885. According to your background, you arrived in America 2 months ago. Your English, according to your language skills, is limited. You took, according to your employment, a position as a domestic servant in a wealthy household. Your employer, according to his behaviour, made unwanted sexual advances. You refused according to your resistance. He became angry, according to his response. Your employer told, according to his lies, his wife that you had been acting strangely. The wife, according to her interpretation, filtered through class and ethnic prejudice, believed you were probably mentally unstable. Irish servants, according to stereotypes, were known for being emotional and unstable. They called, according to their decision, a doctor to examine you. The doctor, according to the examination, spoke to you in rapid English you couldn't fully understand. You tried, according to your attempts, to explain in your limited English about your employer's behaviour. Your explanation, according to the doctor's interpretation, sounded like paranoid delusions. Of course, a respectable gentleman wouldn't behave as you described. Your agitation, according to his assessment, and your limited English made you seem confused and possibly insane. You were committed, according to the diagnosis, for mania and confusion. In the asylum, according to the conditions for poor immigrant women, you are placed in the worst ward. The attendants, according to their contempt, treat you with open hostility. You are a poor Irish woman, according to their view, probably drank too much and went mad. They don't believe, according to their assumptions, that you have any legitimate grievance. Your attempts to explain, according to the language barrier, are futile. You are trapped, according to the situation, by poverty, immigration status, language barriers and gender all at once. Women of colour, according to the historical record, were often confined in segregated asylum wards with the worst conditions. When the asylum system began, according to the policy, many institutions didn't accept non-white patients at all. Later, according to changes, they were accepted but housed separately in sections that received the least funding and worst treatment. Black women, according to institutional racism, were subject to even more brutal treatments, based on racist medical theories about their supposedly higher pain tolerance and lower intelligence. According to medical texts from the era analysed by historian Vanessa Jackson, doctors applied different diagnostic criteria to black women than to white women. Behaviours that might be seen as illness in white women, according to the racial bias, were attributed to inherent racial characteristics in black women. Anger at oppression, according to the interpretation, was seen as evidence of natural savagery, rather than a legitimate response to injustice. The asylum, according to this function, became another tool of racial oppression. Now let's discuss how the asylum system evolved and when reform finally came. According to historical timeline, meaningful reform didn't happen until the 20th century, and even then, according to the limitations, many problems persisted. The ease of commitment, according to legal changes, was gradually restricted. Patient rights, according to developing law, were slowly recognized. Conditions, according to reforms, improved in many institutions. The women's rights movement, according to its impact, played a crucial role in asylum reform. Suffragists, according to their activism, saw asylum abuse as connected to broader patterns of male power over women. Susan B. Anthony Elizabeth Cady Stanton and other women's rights leaders, according to their advocacy, spoke out about wrongful commitment and demanded legal protections. The connection, according to their argument, between denying women the vote and denying them control over their own bodies and minds was clear. Medical understanding, according to its evolution, slowly improved. The rise of psychoanalysis in the early 20th century, according to new frameworks, offered alternatives to the crude biological theories that had dominated Victorian psychiatry. The recognition, according to developing knowledge, that talking therapies could help mental illness reduced reliance on physical interventions. The understanding, according to scientific progress, that many female mental illnesses were actually responses to oppression rather than inherent female weakness, challenged old assumptions. Legal reforms, according to their gradual implementation, made commitment more difficult. Requirements for jury trials, according to new laws, gave people facing commitment a chance to contest it. Legal representation, according to developing rights, became more available. Periodic review of commitments, according to new procedures, meant people couldn't be locked away indefinitely without reassessment. These changes, according to their impact, made wrongful commitment less common, but according to important caveats, we shouldn't imagine that all problems ended in the early 20th century or are solved today. Involuntary commitment, according to continuing practice, still exists. Women, according to modern statistics, are still more likely than men to be diagnosed with certain mental illnesses and prescribed psychiatric medications. The gender biases, according to ongoing research, haven't disappeared. They've evolved. Modern psychiatric practice, according to contemporary analysis, still struggles with how to distinguish mental illness from reasonable responses to oppressive circumstances. Women who are depressed or anxious, according to clinical reality, often have very good reasons for those feelings rooted in sexism, violence, economic inequality, or other external factors. Treating their feelings as individual pathology, according to the critique, medicalizes social problems. This is, according to feminist analysis, a modern version of the Victorian problem of using medicine to manage women who challenge the status quo. Think about the echoes you can see today. Women who report sexual assault or domestic violence, according to modern patterns, are sometimes treated as if they're mentally unstable rather than as victims of crime. Women who display anger, according to gendered expectations, are often pathologized when similar displays by men are accepted as normal. Women who don't want children, according to social assumptions, face suggestions that something is psychologically wrong with them. The specific dynamics have changed, according to the evolution, but the underlying pattern of medical authority being used to enforce gender norms persists in subtler forms. Let's explore some of the most notorious asylum scandals that eventually sparked public outrage and reform. According to investigative journalism from the era, exposes of asylum conditions created public pressure for change. These scandals, according to their impact, revealed to the public what went on behind asylum walls. The Willard Asylum scandal in New York, according to investigations in 1910, revealed that hundreds of patients had died from neglect and abuse. Reporters found, according to their discoveries, patients living in filth, being beaten by attendants, and receiving no medical care. The scandal, according to its outcome, led to a complete overhaul of the institution's management and new oversight procedures. The case of Mrs. E.P.W. Packard, according to her published Exposé 8, created nationwide attention. Her book Marital Power Exemplified, according to its detailed account, described her 3 years of wrongful commitment and the legal battle to be released. Her testimony before state legislatures, according to its impact, helped pass laws in multiple states requiring jury trials before commitment. Meet Helene, whose case became a scandal in Massachusetts in 1895. According to your story, you were committed by your husband for insubordination. You were, according to the medical assessment, completely sane, but you remained in the asylum, according to the duration. for 7 years because no one would authorize your release. Your brother, according to his persistence, finally hired a lawyer to investigate. The lawyer discovered, according to his findings, that the asylum had been billing your husband for your care, but your husband had stopped paying after the first year. The asylum, according to the economic motive, kept you confined anyway because releasing you would mean admitting they'd been holding you illegally. Your case, according to legal proceedings, became front-page news when your brother filed a lawsuit. The scandal revealed, according to investigations, that the asylum had dozens of similar cases, patients whose families had stopped paying but who were kept confined anyway. Some patients, according to the discoveries, had been working in the asylum's laundry and farm to pay for their keep. The practice, according to legal analysis, amounted to enslavement. The asylum superintendent was forced to resign, according to the outcome, and major reforms were implemented. The role of the press, according to historical analysis, was crucial in asylum reform. Newspapers, according to their investigations, sent reporters undercover into asylums. The resulting expositors, according to their sensational nature, sold papers and created public outrage. The combination of shocking stories and circulation pressures, according to the dynamic, meant newspapers actively sought out asylum abuse stories. Joseph Pulitzer's New York World, according to its crusading journalism, published multiple asylum exposés in the 1880s and 1890s. The paper sent, according to its investigations, Nellie Bly and other reporters undercover. The stories, according to their impact, created pressure on city and state governments to investigate and reform asylum conditions. But according to the limitations, press coverage was selective. Stories about abuse of white middle-class women, according to what sold papers, received the most attention. Poor women, immigrant women, and women of color, according to press bias, were less likely to have their stories told. The reform, according to its incompleteness, benefited some women more than others. Now let's examine the development of new psychiatric theories and how they affected women in asylums. The rise of Freudian psychoanalysis in the early 20th century, according to its impact on asylum treatment, brought new ideas but also new problems for women. Freud's theories, according to their gender assumptions, were deeply misogynistic. Women's psychological problems, according to Freudian theory, stemmed from penis envy, unresolved Oedipal complexes, and failure to accept proper feminine roles. A woman who wanted independence, according to Freudian interpretation, was rejecting her natural feminine masochism and submission. A woman who was ambitious, according to the analysis, was compensating for penis envy by trying to be masculine. These theories, according to their application in asylums, gave new pseudoscientific justifications for old prejudices. Women committed for refusing traditional gender roles, according to Freudian diagnosis, were now said to have neuroses stemming from their failure to accept castration and their jealousy of male privilege. The diagnosis changed according to the evolution, but the function pathologizing female resistance to subordination remained the same. Meet Dr. Sigmund Freud himself, whose theories, according to their widespread adoption, shaped psychiatric treatment of women for decades. His case studies, according to their famous examples, included Anna Obertha Pappenheim, Dora, Ida Bauer, and others. These women, according to modern feminist analysis, were suffering from the constraints of Victorian gender roles. Freud's treatment, according to his approach, focused on helping them adjust to those roles rather than questioning the roles themselves. Dora, according to her case, was an 18-year-old woman who was being sexually harassed by an older man, a friend of her father's. She refused his advances, according to her reasonable response. Her father, according to his betrayal, took the harasser's side. Dora became depressed and developed what we'd now recognize as PTSD symptoms. Freud, according to his diagnosis, said her problem was that she secretly wanted the harassment and was in denial about her desires. Her refusal, according to his interpretation, was evidence of repression that needed to be overcome. Think about what this meant for women in therapy. You are being abused according to your reality. The therapist, according to Freudian theory, tells you that you secretly want the abuse. Your objections, according to the interpretation, are proof that you are in denial. The cure, according to the treatment, involves accepting the abuse as the fulfillment of your natural feminine masochism. The therapy, according to its function, gaslights victims and reinforces the very dynamics causing their distress. Freudian theory, according to its application in Asylums, meant that talking therapy replaced some physical treatments, which was an improvement. But according to the content of that therapy, women were still being told that their problems stemmed from not accepting subordinate gender roles. The method changed according to the evolution, but the goal of enforcing conformity remained. The emergence of new miracle cures in the early 20th century, according to another development, brought new horrors. Insulin shock therapy, according to its introduction in the 1930s, involved injecting patients with massive doses of insulin to induce comas. The treatment, according to its risks, frequently caused brain damage and death, but according to its widespread use, thousands of mental patients, disproportionately women, were subjected to insulin comas. Electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, according to its development in 1938, used electric shocks to induce seizures. The theory, according to its dubious basis, was that seizures somehow reset brain function. The practice, according to its reality, often involved administering shocks without anesthesia or muscle relaxants. Patients, according to their experience, were fully conscious as electricity coursed through their brains, causing violent convulsions that sometimes broke bones. Meet Dorothy, subjected to ECT in a New York asylum in 1945. According to your background, you were committed for postpartum depression after your third child. The depression, according to its cause, stemmed from exhaustion, lack of support, and your husband's affair. But according to the diagnosis, you had a chemical imbalance that required shock treatment. The procedure, according to what happens to you, is terrifying. You are strapped to a table, according to the restraints. Electrodes are placed, according to the positioning, on your temples. The doctor flips a switch, according to the procedure. Electricity, according to the current, shoots through your brain. Your body, according to the reaction, convulses violently. You bite your tongue, according to the seizure. Your muscles, according to the force, strain against the restraints. You lose consciousness, according to the effect. When you wake, according to the aftermath, you can't remember who you are or where you are. The amnesia, according to its duration, lasts for hours. Even after your memory returns partially, according to the damage, you've lost memories of your children, your wedding, years of your life. The treatment, according to its repetition, happens 3 times a week for 2 months. Each session, according to cumulative effects, destroys more of your memory. The doctors, according to their assessment, declare you improved because you've stopped complaining about your husband and expressing desire to leave him. Your personality, according to the change, has been flattened. Your memory, according to the damage, has been partially destroyed. You can barely remember your children's names, according to the tragedy, but according to medical judgment, you are cured because you are now compliant and docile. ECT, according to its continued use, is still employed today in modified forms with anesthesia and muscle relaxants. Modern proponents, according to their position, claim it is safe and effective for severe depression. Critics, according to their concerns, note that it still causes memory loss and that consent is often coerced. The debates, according to their intensity, continue about whether ECT is legitimate treatment or trauma masquerading as medicine. The development of psychotropic drugs in the 1950s, according to another evolution, changed asylum treatment again. Chlorpromazine thorazine, according to its introduction, was marketed as a chemical lobotomy. The drug, according to its effects, sedated patients into zombie-like states. Patients on Thorazine, according to descriptions, would sit motionless for hours, unable to think clearly or feel emotions. Women in asylums, according to prescription patterns, were heavily medicated. The drugs, according to their function, made patients manageable. A woman who was angry or agitated, according to the response, was given drugs until she sat quietly. The medication, according to its purpose, controlled behavior rather than treating illness, and the drugs, according to their side effects, caused lasting damage: tremors, weight gain, diabetes, tardive dyskinesia, involuntary movements. Think about being forcibly medicated. You are given, according to the procedure, pills you don't want to take. You refuse according to your right, but according to the response, you are held down and injected. The drug, according to its effects, makes your thoughts foggy. You can't, according to the impairment, think clearly enough to advocate for yourself. You feel, according to the emotional blunting, nothing, not happiness, not sadness, just numbness. You exist, according to the state, in a medicated haze where you are no longer fully human. The introduction of lobotomy, according to one of the darkest chapters, brought surgical mutilation masquerading as treatment. Dr. Walter Freeman, according to his invention of the ice pick lobotomy, performed thousands of the procedures, disproportionately on women. The procedure, according to its horrifying simplicity, involved inserting an ice pick-like instrument through the eye socket into the brain, then moving it back and forth to destroy frontal lobe tissue. Freeman, according to his methods, performed lobotomies in his office, in hotel rooms, even in the back of his van, which he called his lobotomobile. He didn't use sterile technique, according to accounts. He didn't use anesthesia beyond electroshock to render patients briefly unconscious, according to the procedure. He performed, according to records, up to 25 lobotomies in a single day. The results, according to documented outcomes, were catastrophic. Many patients, according to the effects, were left in vegetative states. Others, according to the damage, lost their personalities entirely. They could function physically, but had no motivation, no interests, no emotional responses. Some, according to the mortality rate, died from brain hemorrhages or infections. Freeman, according to his claims, declared the procedure a success if it made patients more manageable, even if it destroyed their minds. Meet Rosemary Kennedy, perhaps the most famous lobotomy victim. According to her story, she was the sister of President John F. Kennedy. She had, according to her condition, mild intellectual disability and some behavioral problems. Her father, according to his decision, had her lobotomized in 1941 when she was 23. The procedure, according to its outcome, left her incapacitated for the rest of her life. She lost, according to the damage, the ability to walk or talk coherently. Rosemary's case, according to its significance, illustrates how lobotomy was used to control women who didn't conform. She wasn't violent or dangerous, according to the reality. She was, according to her father's concern, too outgoing and interested in men. The lobotomy, according to its purpose, was meant to make her more docile. It succeeded, according to the outcome, by destroying her personality and capabilities entirely. Thousands of women, according to historical estimates, were lobotomized in the 1940s and 1950s. Women who were depressed, anxious, had personality disorders, were too sexual, or simply annoyed their families, according to the reasons for lobotomy, had their brains mutilated. The procedure, according to its justification, was supposed to cure mental illness. According to its reality, it was a method of permanently disabling women who were considered problematic. The rise of the patient rights movement, according to developments in the 1960s and 1970s, finally brought significant changes. Former mental patients, according to their activism, organized to demand rights and better treatment. They testified, according to their advocacy, before legislatures and courts. They published, according to their writings, accounts of abuse and mistreatment. They demanded, according to their goals, the right to refuse treatment, the right to due process before commitment, and the right to humane conditions. The anti-psychiatry movement, according to its critique, questioned the very foundations of psychiatric diagnosis and treatment. Thinkers like Thomas Sass, according to their arguments, claimed that mental illness was a myth used to control social deviance. R.D. Laing, according to his position, argued that psychosis was sometimes a sane response to an insane world. These radical challenges, according to their impact, forced the psychiatric profession to re-examine its practices. Women's liberation activists, according to their involvement, connected mental health to broader issues of women's oppression. Phyllis Chesler's book, Woman and Madness, according to its 1972 publication, analysed how psychiatry enforced gender norms. The book documented, according to its research, how women were diagnosed and treated differently than men for the same behaviours. The feminist critique, according to its influence, helped change how mental health professionals understood women's psychological distress. Legal changes in the 1970s, according to reform legislation, finally gave mental patients meaningful rights. The right to refuse treatment, according to new laws, meant doctors couldn't forcibly medicate or operate on competent patients. The right to the least restrictive environment, according to legal standards, meant patients couldn't be locked in institutions if outpatient care was possible. The requirement for periodic review, according to new procedures, meant commitments had to be regularly reassessed. The deinstitutionalization movement, according to its implementation starting in the 1960s, closed many large asylums and moved patients to community care. The movement, according to its intentions, aimed to end the warehousing of people in terrible institutions. But, according to the inadequate community services, many former patients ended up homeless or in jails. The reform, according to its incomplete implementation, created new problems while solving old ones. Now, as we approach the end of our journey through Victorian asylums, let me share some final reflections on what this history teaches us. According to the evidence we've examined, the Victorian asylum system for women was not primarily about mental health care. It was, according to its actual function, a mechanism of social control that used medical authority to manage women who challenged gender norms or threatened male power. The women in asylums, according to their diversity, ranged from genuinely mentally ill people who needed care to women suffering from what we'd now recognize as treatable conditions like postpartum depression, to women who were completely sane but inconvenient to their families. The asylum, according to its operation, made no real distinction. All were subjected to the same dehumanizing conditions and harmful treatments. The doctors who ran asylums, according to historical assessment, weren't necessarily evil individuals. Many, according to their beliefs, genuinely thought they were helping patients, but according to the reality, they operated within a medical framework saturated with gender bias and pseudoscience. They had, according to their power, near absolute authority over vulnerable people. And that power, according to its corruption, led to terrible abuses, even when individual doctors had good intentions. Let's examine more specific examples of how asylum medicine intersected with broader social movements and historical moments. The temperance movement, according to its campaign against alcohol, created new avenues for committing women. Women who drank alcohol according to moral judgments could be diagnosed with dipsomania and sent to asylums. The diagnosis, according to its application, was often used against women who drank to cope with abusive marriages or difficult circumstances. Meet Martha, committed to an asylum in Ohio in 1880 for intemperance. According to your situation, your husband beats you regularly. You've started, according to your coping mechanism, drinking whiskey in the evenings to dull the pain and fear. Your drinking, according to the amounts, is moderate by contemporary male standards. Men in your town routinely drink far more. But for a woman, according to gender double standards, Any drinking is excessive. Your husband, according to his strategy, uses your drinking as grounds to have you committed. He tells the examining doctor, according to his claims, that you are a drunk who neglects your household duties. He doesn't mention, according to his omissions, the beatings that drove you to drink. The doctor, according to his diagnosis, declares you an alcoholic in need of asylum treatment. You are committed, according to the outcome, while your husband faces no consequences for the violence that caused your drinking. In the asylum, according to the treatment, you are subjected to aversion therapy for your alcohol problem. You are given, according to the procedure, medicines that make you violently ill. The purpose, according to medical theory, is to associate drinking with nausea, but according to the reality, you weren't an alcoholic. You were a trauma victim self-medicating. The treatment, according to its effects, traumatizes you further while doing nothing to address the domestic violence that caused your distress. The intersection of race and asylum commitment, according to historical analysis, created particular horrors for women of color. In the post-Civil War South, according to documented practices, asylums became tools for controlling formerly enslaved people. Black women who asserted their freedom, according to white interpretations, could be diagnosed as insane. Meet Susan, a black woman committed to a Georgia asylum in 1870. According to your background, you were enslaved until age 35, after emancipation. According to your efforts, you worked hard, saved money, and bought land. You are successful, according to economic measures, with a productive farm and money in the bank. But, according to local white residents, your success is threatening. A black woman owning property and being economically independent, according to their worldview, is unnatural. A white neighbor, according to his desire to take your land, claims you are mentally unstable. He says, according to his testimony to a doctor, that you have delusions of grandeur. You think you are as good as white people. The doctor, according to racist medical theory, agrees that a black woman believing herself equal to whites indicates insanity. You are committed, according to the legal process, and your property is placed under a white guardian's control, the same neighbor who had you committed. In the asylum, according to the segregated conditions, you are placed in the Negro wing. The conditions, according to comparative analysis, are far worse than the white wards. Less food, according to the rations, colder temperatures, according to inadequate heating, more violence from attendants, according to racist brutality. The medical care, according to its racism, is based on theories that black people feel less pain and need harsher discipline. The asylum's use as a tool of racial control, according to historical patterns, continued well into the 20th century. During the civil rights era, according to documented cases, some activists were committed to asylums. Being a black person who challenged segregation according to white Southern psychiatry could be interpreted as evidence of mental illness. The diagnosis, according to its function, was a method of silencing dissent and punishing resistance. The treatment of lesbian and bisexual women in asylums, according to another dark chapter, involved attempts to cure same-sex attraction through various brutal methods. Women who loved women, according to psychiatric diagnosis until 1973, were classified as mentally ill. The treatment, according to its methods, ranged from psychoanalysis intended to redirect desire toward men, to aversion therapy, to lobotomy. Meet Margaret, committed to a California asylum in 1955 for homosexuality. According to your story, you lived with your female partner for 5 years. Your relationship, according to its nature, was loving and stable, but according to your family's discovery of the relationship, they were horrified. Homosexuality, according to medical classification of the era, was a mental illness that could and should be cured. Your family, according to their intervention, had you committed for conversion therapy. The treatment, according to its methods, includes showing you images of women while administering electric shocks. The theory, according to behavioral conditioning, is that you'll learn to associate women with pain and thus redirect direction toward men. The practice, according to its reality, is torture that causes lasting psychological trauma. You are also given, according to the pharmaceutical intervention, large doses of hormones meant to correct your sexuality. The hormones, according to their effects, make you physically ill and emotionally unstable. They don't, according to the outcome, change your sexual orientation. All they do, according to the damage, is harm your health and traumatize you. You are kept in the asylum, according to the duration, for 2 years of failed cures. The experiences of transgender and gender non-conforming people in asylums, according to limited historical records, were similarly horrific. People whose gender identity didn't match their assigned sex, according to medical understanding of the era, were classified as deeply mentally ill. The treatment, according to its goal, was to force conformity to assigned gender roles through any means necessary. Women who expressed masculine interests or presentation according to diagnoses might be committed for gender inversion. The treatment, according to its approach, involved forcing them into hyper-feminine activities and appearance. They were required, according to the therapy, to wear dresses, learn domestic skills, and accept feminine subordination. Resistance to this regendering, according to interpretation, was taken as evidence of continuing illness. The asylum's role in controlling female sexuality generally, according to broader patterns, was pervasive. Women who were too sexual, according to moral judgments, could be committed for nymphomania. Women who weren't sexual enough, according to opposite concerns, could be committed for frigidity. Women who were sexual before marriage, according to social standards, could be committed for moral degeneracy. Women who were sexual outside marriage, according to adultery, could be committed for promiscuity. Think about the impossible standards. You are supposed to be according to ideal femininity, completely pure and sexually innocent before marriage. Then, according to expectations after marriage, you are supposed to be sexually available and responsive to your husband. But not according to the restrictions too sexual. That would be nymphomania. And not according to the other extreme, sexually reluctant. That would be frigidity. The acceptable range, according to the narrow window, is almost impossible to navigate, and any deviation according to the consequences can be medicalized and punished through asylum commitment. The intersection of poverty and asylum commitment, according to economic analysis, created another layer of injustice. Poor women, according to their vulnerability, were easily swept into asylums and very difficult to get out. When you are poor, according to the disadvantages, you lack resources to fight commitment, hire lawyers, or advocate for your release. You have, according to poverty's effects, no one with social influence to pressure authorities on your behalf. Workhouses and almshouses, according to their function for poor relief, often served as pipelines to asylums. A poor woman in a workhouse, according to administrative convenience, might be transferred to an asylum at any sign of trouble. The definitions, according to their vagueness, were flexible: being difficult, being unmanageable, not working hard enough, according to various interpretations, could all be classified as mental illness, justifying transfer to the asylum. Once in the asylum, according to the economic trap, poor women had almost no chance of release. Their families, according to financial reality, couldn't afford private care or legal representation. The state, according to institutional inertia, saw no reason to release them. They had nowhere to go and no one advocating for them. They became, according to the outcome, permanent residents of the asylum, their poverty ensuring their captivity. The asylum, as an economic institution, according to its business model, had perverse incentives regarding patient labour. The most functional patients, according to labour exploitation, worked in asylum facilities, kitchens, laundries, farms, workshops. Their work, according to economic value, was essential to asylum operations, but according to payment, they received nothing or mere tokens. The asylum, according to this arrangement, benefited from unpaid labor of captive workers. Think about being a patient worker. You are confined according to the reality. Against your will, you work according to the requirement. Long hours in the asylum's laundry or farm. The work, according to its difficulty, is hard physical labor. You receive, according to payment, no wages or perhaps a few cents. The asylum, according to its profit, saves enormous labor costs by using patient workers instead of paid employees. And your labor, according to its irony, keeps you confined. You are too valuable as a worker for the asylum to release you. Some asylums, according to business practices, actively resisted releasing productive workers. A woman who had learned, according to her asylum training, to work efficiently in the laundry might be kept indefinitely because her labor was valuable. The medical justification, according to fabricated reasons, would be that she still needed treatment. The economic reality, according to the true motive, was that the asylum didn't want to lose a good worker. The role of attendants in asylum life, according to their position in the system, deserves closer examination. Attendants, according to their job, had daily direct contact with patients. They controlled, according to their power, almost every aspect of patients' lives. Yet they were, according to their status, poorly paid, minimally trained, and often brutal. Asylum attendant positions, according to their staffing, attracted people who couldn't find better work. The pay was low, according to compensation. The work was difficult and often disgusting, according to its nature. The hours were long, according to the shifts. The training, according to its inadequacy, was minimal or non-existent. Many attendants, according to their backgrounds, had no education and no understanding of mental illness. The power dynamic, according to its corruption, created conditions for abuse. Attendants had, according to their authority, nearly absolute power over patients. Patients had, according to their powerlessness, no ability to complain effectively. If a patient accused an attendant of abuse, according to credibility, the attendant's word was believed over the insane patient's testimony. This created, according to the inevitable result, an environment where abuse could flourish unchecked. Some attendants, according to their behavior, were genuinely kind and tried to help patients. But according to the system's structure, even kind attendants operated within brutal conditions, with inadequate resources. The best intentions, according to systematic constraints, couldn't overcome the fundamental problems of overcrowding, underfunding, and lack of effective treatments. The worst attendants, according to documented abuses, used their power for cruelty and sexual exploitation. Female patients, according to their vulnerability, were sometimes raped by male attendants. The victims, according to reporting mechanisms, had no effective way to report these crimes. If they did report, according to likely responses, they were punished for making false accusations or for seductive behavior that supposedly caused the assault. The families who committed women, according to their motivations, had varied reasons. Some genuinely believed, according to the standards of the time, that the women were mentally ill and needed care. Others, according to the evidence, were cynically using the asylum system to dispose of inconvenient women or seize their property. Most, according to the complexity, probably fell somewhere in between, believing in good faith that commitment was necessary while also benefiting from it. The legal system, according to its role, enabled all of this by giving women almost no rights in the commitment process and making escape nearly impossible. The laws, according to their design, treated women as property and incompetents rather than as full legal persons. The reforms, according to their eventual arrival, came far too slowly for the thousands of women who suffered and died while waiting for change. Before we close, let's consider the lasting trauma that asylum commitment created, both for individuals and for families. Women who were released from asylums, according to their experiences, carried psychological scars for life. The trauma, according to its manifestations, included nightmares, hypervigilance, difficulty trusting others, and lasting fear of confinement or medical authority. The stigma of having been in an asylum, according to social consequences, followed women for the rest of their lives. Once labelled insane, according to public perception, you never fully escaped that label. Former patients, according to social treatment, faced discrimination in employment, housing, and relationships. The asylum stay, according to its permanent mark, defined you in others' eyes regardless of the circumstances of your commitment or your current mental state. For children who had mothers taken to asylums, according to the trauma passed down, the effects were similarly lasting. Children who saw their mothers dragged away, according to their memories, carried that trauma into adulthood. They grew up, according to the separation, without maternal care and often without any explanation of what had happened to their mothers. The loss, according to its ambiguity, was sometimes more difficult than if their mothers had died. Meet Thomas, whose mother was committed to an asylum when he was 8 years old in 1885. According to your memories, men came to the house one day and took your mother away while she screamed and pleaded. Your father, according to his explanation, told you she was sick and needed treatment. You were not, according to restrictions, allowed to visit her. You received no letters according to communication bans. For years, according to your childhood understanding, you didn't know if she was alive or dead. When you were finally allowed to visit at age 16, according to the reunion, you barely recognized the woman you saw. Your mother, according to her condition after 8 years in the asylum, was a shadow of the person you remembered. The asylum, according to its effects, had broken her spirit. She sat, according to her demeanor, staring at nothing, barely responding when you spoke. The vibrant, loving mother you remembered, according to the transformation, was gone, replaced by this hollow shell. She died, according to death records, 2 years later in the asylum. You never got to truly have her back, according to the loss. The asylum, according to its destruction, stole not just 8 years but your entire relationship. The trauma, according to its legacy, affected your own life. You struggled with trust, with authority, with institutions. You never married, according to your fear, because you were terrified of the power a husband could have over a wife. Your mother's fate, according to its lesson, taught you that women could be disappeared at any moment by the men who claimed to love them. The records that asylums kept on patients, according to another lasting harm, created documentation that could haunt people for generations. Asylum admission records were, according to later practices, sometimes consulted by employers, insurance companies, or other institutions. Having an ancestor who was in an asylum, according to eugenic thinking, was seen as a genetic taint. In the early 20th century, according to eugenics movement practices, asylum records were used to justify forced sterilization. Women in asylums, according to eugenic theory, were genetically inferior and shouldn't be allowed to reproduce. The sterilizations, according to legal authority, were performed without consent and often without even informing the victims. Tens of thousands of women, according to historical estimates, were sterilized in American asylums between 1907 and 1970s. Meet Rachel, sterilized in a Virginia asylum in 1927. According to your commitment, you were sent to the asylum at age 17 for promiscuity. You had a baby out of wedlock. The asylum, according to its determination, decided you were feeble-minded and a threat to the gene pool. You were, according to the procedure, sterilized without your consent or knowledge. You were told, according to the lie, that you were having your appendix removed. You discovered, according to when you found out, years later when you tried to have children after marrying. You were, according to medical examination, unable to conceive. The doctor, according to his discovery, found surgical scars indicating you'd been sterilized. The asylum had stolen, according to the crime, your reproductive capacity without your consent. The trauma, according to its depth, devastated you. The opportunity to have a family, according to the loss, had been taken from you by doctors who viewed you as defective breeding stock. The Buck v. Bell Supreme Court case, according to its infamous 1927 decision, upheld the constitutionality of forced sterilization of asylum patients. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, according to his opinion, wrote, "3 generations of imbeciles are enough." The ruling, according to its authorization, gave legal sanction to eugenic sterilization programs. Thousands more women, according to the outcome, were sterilized under this legal authority. The intersection of asylum commitment and immigration policy, according to another dimension of harm, created barriers for immigrant families. Immigrants who had family members in asylums, according to immigration restrictions, could be denied entry to the United States. The mental illness of a relative, according to immigration law, was seen as evidence of bad genetic stock. Immigrants already in the United States who were committed to asylums, according to deportation policies, could be sent back to their countries of origin. The commitment, according to its consequence, meant not just loss of freedom, but loss of your adopted country. For immigrants who had fled persecution or poverty, according to the stakes, deportation from an asylum could be a death sentence. The cost of asylum care, according to economic burdens, often impoverished families. Private asylum care, according to its expense, was extremely costly. Families, according to financial strain, sometimes had to sell homes, land, or businesses to pay for a woman's institutionalization. And the cost, according to its duration, continued for years or decades if the woman was never released. State asylums, according to their funding, were theoretically free for poor patients, but according to actual practice, families were often pressured to contribute what they could, and the indirect costs, according to economic impact, were significant lost wages if the woman had been working, lost domestic labour if she had been managing a household, cost of caring for children she had been raising. Some families, according to financial desperation, abandoned women in state asylums because they couldn't afford to bring them home even if release was possible. The women, according to their fate, remained in asylums not because they were too ill to leave, but because their families were too poor to support them outside. The religious dimensions of asylum commitment, according to another aspect, created particular suffering for women whose faith was strong. Being in an asylum according to restrictions often meant being denied access to religious practice. You couldn't, according to rules, attend services outside the asylum. The asylum chaplain, according to his availability, might not serve your denomination. Your religious items, according to confiscation, might be taken as potential weapons or signs of religious mania. For women who had relied on faith for meaning and comfort, according to spiritual deprivation, this was devastating. Your prayer book, according to what is taken, is confiscated. Your rosary, according to restrictions, is forbidden. Your ability to observe religious holy days, according to limitations, is constrained. The asylum, according to its control, separates you from God as well as from freedom. Meet Hannah, a Jewish woman committed to a Pennsylvania asylum in 1890. According to your background, you came from a devout family and observed Orthodox practices. In the asylum, according to the conditions, you cannot observe kashrut, the dietary laws. You are forced to eat, according to the food, non-kosher food. You cannot observe Shabbat, according to work requirements. You are made to work on Saturdays like any other day. The asylum has no Jewish services according to the absence of accommodation. The chaplain is Christian, according to his identity. When you try to pray in Hebrew, according to the response, attendants mock you and tell you to speak English. When you refuse to eat non-kosher food, according to the punishment, you are force-fed. Your faith, according to the assault which has sustained you through life's hardships, is now used to torment you. The grief of families who had women taken to asylums according to emotional impacts was complicated and often unresolved. You couldn't, according to the ambiguity, properly mourn because she wasn't dead, but you couldn't, according to separation, have her in your life either. She existed according to the limbo, somewhere between life and death, present but absent, living but lost to you. Siblings of women committed to asylums, according to their experiences, often carried guilt and confusion. If you were a sister, according to the fear, you might wonder if the same fate awaited you. The family trait, according to genetic thinking, might mark you as vulnerable too. If you were a brother, according to the guilt, you might feel you should have protected her but didn't. The personal belongings left behind by women taken to asylums, according to their material presence, haunted families. Her clothes still in the closet, according to what remains. Her books on the shelf, according to the markers of her identity. Her sewing basket, her letters, her photographs, according to these traces of her life, remained while she was gone. Families, according to their dilemma, didn't know whether to keep these things in hope of her return or pack them away in acceptance that she was gone forever. The final decades of the asylum system, according to historical transition, saw gradual improvements but also continued abuses. Even as conditions got better in some institutions, according to uneven progress, others remained terrible. Even as legal rights expanded, according to incomplete protection, loopholes remained. The system, according to its resistance to change, adapted but didn't fundamentally transform until deinstitutionalization in the 1960s to 70s. And deinstitutionalization, according to its mixed results, solved some problems while creating others. The large asylums closed according to the reform, but community mental health services, according to inadequate funding, were never adequately developed. Many former patients, according to their fate, ended up homeless or in jails. The asylum system ended according to the transition, but the problem of how to care for people with serious mental illness while respecting their rights and dignity remains unresolved. As you drift off to sleep tonight after spending this long night exploring the dark world of Victorian asylums, I want you to think about several things. First, according to gratitude, think about the legal rights you have today that Victorian women lacked. You can't be committed to psychiatric care according to modern law without due process. You have, according to legal protections, the right to refuse treatment. You can, according to constitutional rights, challenge your confinement in court. These rights, according to their origin, were won by women who survived asylums and dedicated their lives to making sure others wouldn't suffer as they had. But second, according to vigilance, think about how these issues aren't entirely solved. Involuntary commitment, according to its continuation, still exists. The standards for what constitutes mental illness, according to their cultural embedding, still reflect social norms that may be questioned. Women's anger, sadness, or non-conformity, according to modern patterns, can still be pathologized rather than understood as reasonable responses to difficult circumstances. The struggle, according to its ongoing nature, to prevent medicine from being used as social control continues. Third, according to empathy, remember the women we've met tonight. Sarah dragged from her home for questioning her husband's authority. Elizabeth Packard locked away for religious disagreement. Julia surgically mutilated for refusing unwanted sex. Agnes tortured with ice water in the name of treatment. Mary broken in restraints for objecting to mistreatment. Clarissa imprisoned for domestic insubordination. Emily robbed of her fortune through false diagnosis. Bridget trapped by language barriers and ethnic prejudice. These women, according to their humanity, were real people who suffered real torture in a system that claimed to be helping them. Fourth, according to historical awareness, understand that this wasn't ancient history. Women were being committed to asylums for these kinds of reasons, according to the timeline into the 20th century. There are people still alive today, according to living memory, whose grandmothers or great-grandmothers were committed to Victorian-era asylums. The women in these stories, according to their proximity, lived just a few generations before us. Their suffering, according to chronological closeness, is recent enough that we can't dismiss it as something from a distant, less enlightened age. Fifth, according to action, think about how you can support better mental health care and protect individual rights. Support according to advocacy opportunities, laws that protect patients' rights. Challenge according to critical thinking, the pathologization of normal responses to oppression. Advocate according to social justice for mental health care that addresses social causes of distress rather than just medicating individuals. Remember, according to the lesson that people labeled as mentally ill are still people who deserve dignity, rights, and care. Sweet dreams, and may you wake tomorrow with deep appreciation for the rights won by women who survived asylums and fought for change, determination to protect those rights for future generations, compassion for people struggling with mental illness, and commitment to a world where medical care heals rather than harms, where difference isn't pathologized, and where no one can be locked away simply for being inconvenient or challenging unjust power. May you remember that the fight for human dignity and bodily autonomy, according to its importance, is never finished. Thank you for spending this long night with me, exploring this dark chapter of history. Thank you for meeting Sarah, Elizabeth, Julia, Agnes, Mary, Clarissa, Emily, Bridget, and all the women whose names we'll never know but whose suffering teaches us important lessons about power, gender, and the dangers of medical authority without accountability. Sleep well, and remember that bearing witness to historical injustice, according to its value, helps us recognize and resist injustice in our own time. Good night. And may your dreams be filled with visions of a world where everyone's humanity is recognized and protected. Sweet dreams.